Hey there! Did you know Kroger always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower-than-low prices? And when you download the Kroger app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Kroger today. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Sports Social, now on the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hi, it's Bryn Lucas from the Autosport F1 and Motorsport podcast, and you can follow this year's Formula One season with us on the Sports Social Podcast Network. Our expert Formula One team are on the ground at every Grand Prix to bring you regular access behind the scenes and peel back the veil of the Formula One world. Listen to the Autosport F1 and Motorsport podcast now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AEye Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our Quick Publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AEye Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AEye Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to AEye Scouted on Anfield Index Pro. I'm Dave Hendrick, joined as always by Mr. Karl Matchett. How are you, sir?
7 out of 10, good sir. How are you?
I am good. How has the house move gone? Are you settled in?
We are settled in. We are still surrounded by boxes, and we are gradually getting there.
Good stuff. Well, I don't envy you because moving house is the worst thing in the world. But as you pointed out, that is London life, and it's the hedonistic lifestyle that you lead. We're here today to discuss Liverpool versus Sparta Prague. Now, I have watched Sparta Prague once this season, and I'm fairly certain I fell asleep during the game. So don't really have much to say on them. So we'll get to Liverpool versus Sparta Prague. Let's take a look at the other ties in the Europa League, which actually begin today for those wanting to watch a good game at 5:45 today. Sporting take on Atalanta in what I actually think is the tie of the round. So what do you make of that one? Because that's two teams who play good, attractive football, one of whom is managed by a fella who might be our next manager, the other of whom we have played in the Champions League in the not-too-distant past. What do you make of this one?
My first thing to say about this one is my surprise that you appear to be not watching it, since you just tried to change our podcast to while it's on, due to a miscommunication between the two of us. So I'll be watching this one this evening as we're recording this. It should be a really, really intriguing encounter. I think earlier in the season it might have been nowhere near as interesting as it is now, just on Atalanta's form, their style of play earlier in the season and so on. But sort of second half of the campaign, I think they've been much better, much more of a competitive team, much more of an interesting outfit to watch. I know the last couple of results haven't gone their way, but putting themselves back in contention for Europa spot again next season. So I think there's lots to like about Atalanta, even if not quite at the levels of the craziness of 4 seasons ago, let's say. And obviously Sporting, there are about 25 storylines around them at the minute, with Amorim being probably just about on top just because of the number of people who are after him. But someone you were recommending for a few Premier League teams last season, Gyökeres, is obviously generating a lot of headlines himself at the moment. So definitely one of the ties to watch across all of Europe this week, not just the Europa League.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Victor Gyökeres was at Coventry last season, and I just couldn't understand why Brentford, for example, didn't jump in and pay the 17 million to get him when they knew they were going to be without Ivan Toney, and they knew Ivan Toney was going to leave. And in the end, they've played it out without Toney. They've had a fairly crappy season, and they've ended up committing to pay, I think, 37 million euro for Igor Thiago, who's not as proven as Victor Gyökeres. I thought Spurs should have moved on from Harry Kane a bit earlier and maybe considered Gyökeres because he does have a lot of similarities to his game. But he's gone to Sporting, and it was the best thing for him because the development of his all-round game under Amorim has been sensational. This Atalanta team, Karl, are really interesting because, as you said, they're not the team from a couple of years ago. They're unrecognisable, really, from that team, both in terms of a lot of what they do on the pitch, but also the individuals. I mean, that famous front four of Papu Gomez, Josip Ilicic, Luis, the Colombian fella? Murillo, yes, Luis Murillo and Duvan Zapata. They've all moved on, but they do have a really exciting group of attackers there now in Ademola Lookman, Charles de Ketelaere, and former West Ham striker Gianluca Scamacca, who's been a bit hit and miss this season, but I still back him in the long run. They've got a couple of really interesting players and a couple that have been linked to us, even though you wouldn't necessarily say reliably linked. Ederson, the holding midfielder, does look a good player. And Giorgio Scalvini, the young centre-back, looks a hell of a prospect. Of that group, who is it that catches the eye, or is there somebody else at Atalanta that you think is worth keeping an eye on from, say, a Liverpool point of view?
I mean, always a tricky question now in 2024 when we don't know who we'll have or what style we'll play, I suppose. But in general excitement terms, I still think there's a decent player there for Charles de Ketelaere to be found. I don't think that's a Liverpool-suited style necessarily. Again, unless we have like a massive sea change and suddenly that becomes the kind of thing we need. I don't think he wouldn't suit the team now, let's say. But I do think Scalvini is probably the one to look at. You know, very young for a centre back, only 20 years of age, but I think his on the ball quality marks him out as a lot different to a lot of other defenders. To be perfectly honest, technical level of quality I think is really, really high. A little bit rash maybe in some of his defensive work, but partly to be expected as a young centre back, like we say. They have a few other players. I'd like to see a bit more of Ruggeri, who plays on the left for them. I've not necessarily seen him be super consistent, but I'm aware that it's a bit of a pick and choose my matches with Atalanta, so I may well have just
and he's still young as well, isn't he? Like 21.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Scalvini is really interesting, and for the Italian national team to have a situation now where you have him, you have Bastoni, and you have he's a bit older, but Buongiorno at Torino. Like, that's potentially a back three that could be together for a long time with the national team. And there's a couple of others sort of on the up as well. And then when you consider the wing back options and that, you start to see a picture of what the Italian national team could become. One other attacking talent to keep an eye out for, I don't know if he'll play. I think he might be injured. I assume he's injured. He's barely played for most of the year. But El Bilal Toure, just in the long haul, is one to keep an eye on. Came quite close to joining Everton. Hello, I'm here to annoy you. I'm here to annoy you into listening to more of me and more of others on EPL Index. We don't just have the Anfield Index stuff. We've got EPL Index as well, which covers the entirety of the Premier League. And we have 3 podcasts and a whole bunch of really good writing on EPLindex.com. The podcasts are my own two-footed podcast, which is every day at 4 p.m, Monday through Friday, covering the whole league. We have A Tad Predictable, hosted by Tadiwa. You know Tadiwa, he does Anfield Index. He presents A Tad Predictable before every Premier League match week. And then Kevin De Vries and his crew on the EPL Roundtable, they're every week after the Premier League match week. So make sure you listen to everything we're doing on EPL Index and follow us there on Twitter at EPL Index. Thank you. Bye-bye. But opted for Atalanta, and I think he's another one with a big future ahead. So they're definitely a team to watch. That's definitely a game to watch. Tomorrow night, then, Qarabag against Leverkusen. Obvious reasons to be interested in that one from a Liverpool fan point of view, but unfortunately, it is on at the same time as our game, so you'll have to prioritise. But obviously, Xabi doing some impressive bits. Milan against the other Prague team, Slavia. That's one that I think there's some level of interest in watching because there's some really good players in that Milan team. Freiburg versus West Ham, I could have done without because we've seen it twice this year. Benfica versus Rangers, it will be interesting to see how Benfica bounce back from the hammering they took at the weekend. It'll also be interesting to see if Rangers really prioritise the Europa League now, given they're top in Scotland. So maybe they start to maybe focus in on the league. And then Marseille against Villarreal. Of those games, of those 5 games, what would be the one for you to watch?
I would probably make it Benfica Rangers, because not just the 5-0 thrashing by Porto, but they also got beat by Sporting in the Cup the game before. So it's back-to-back defeats for Benfica, which is not normal at all. They also didn't win the second leg of the Europa League play-in or play-off or qualifying round, or whatever the hell we call that stupid non-existent round. So it's 1 win in 4 for them, which is really unusual. They are at home in the first leg, which obviously puts a bit more pressure on them to get a result. But like you said, Rangers kind of, you feel like this is an opportunity for them to really go for it on 2 fronts, which doesn't often happen for them, unless you're talking about 2 cups, 2 domestic cups in Scotland previously. I think that would probably be the single standout match for me. I don't really care either way about like the Freiburg game or the the Milan Slavia game. Even Leverkusen. I mean, Karabag on home soil are pretty decent. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't necessarily lose that first leg, but across the 2 legs, I think there's such a massive gap there. There's just not really much interest in that tie. So it'd probably be the Benfica Rangers one. And Rangers have done better on the road recently, even in Europe, than they have done previously.
Yeah, that one should be interesting. Like you say, there's a lot of pressure mounting now on Roger Schmidt. Because, like you said, they lost to Sporting in the Cup. They got hammered at the weekend, and what that also meant was that Sporting went above them in the league with the game in hand. So very much advantage Sporting there and that second leg of the Cup to come. I think the game of the day in the Europa League tomorrow is Roma versus Brighton, which is on at the same time as us. Now, obviously, Brighton, I've seen people say it's a bad season. They're 9th. They're still in Europe. I just don't understand how people can claim that's a bad season. They're Brighton and Hove Albion. Like, for them, this is one of the best seasons in their history. But they're going up against a Roma team who have had a very strange season and obviously sacked Jose Mourinho in a move that was not all that popular with the fans in January. But in the ultimate, well, you might be upset, but you're not going to be upset for long move. They appointed Daniele De Rossi, who sits just below Francesco Totti in the Roma historical totem of great players. And since he's taken over, they have been better. And they've won 6 of 7 domestically. They're progressing here, knocked out Feyenoord in the playoff knockout thing, and they look a more composed, compact unit than they did previously under Mourinho, and they looked it's got a bit more purpose to them as well.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of interesting things. I've only watched a couple of their games, but I sort of read a couple of pieces on their change in style, and I watched the games thereafter after reading that piece, and I think the use of Dybala from the right-hand side has been one of the interesting little tweaks that he's made, rather than in a sort of central area. He's been a bit more freedom of movement. I'd say a little bit less defensive responsibility in his own half, at least, but much more freedom offensively to get involved. I think that's been a bit of a key, unlocking his, obvious ability from a technical level. I don't want to say that, he's suddenly turned them around so much, because one, obviously, you've got a very big bounce there for the name at the club and, the fans behind him and so on and so forth. They've also had a few matches which you'd absolutely expect them to win. Some of that run is against like Monza and Frosinone and that kind of thing. So, you'd expect that to be wins for Roma in any case, but it definitely looks as though they have more purpose and more off the ball structure when they're attacking, if you get what I mean. They're set up much better against transitions now, which has never been a Mourinho strong point. He's always been continuous off the ball organisation, as in when they don't have the ball for long stretches, or trying to obviously be a bit more forceful, a bit more direct going forward, that kind of thing. But transition play is not really, I don't think, ever been a big strength of his. So it's definitely looking better in that regard. Brighton are one of the better teams at transition play, but are also one of the most open teams against them in transition play. So it should be a really entertaining match.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's probably one I'll watch the replay of after the fact, because obviously, again, it's at the same time as our games. So just on Brighton and West Ham, Karl, obviously both of them still kind of, jockeying for position in the Premier League, chasing European football for next season as a safety net should they fail to win this competition. West Ham sits seventh. Fair to say their form has been mixed in the Premier League of late. Last 5 games, 3 defeats, 2 wins. Brighton, very much the same in terms of mixed form, 2 wins, 2 draws. 2 wins, 2 defeats and a draw in their last 5. They're 9th, but they're only 3 points behind West Ham. And I think both of them and Newcastle will be very much eyeing up a Manchester United team that look like they're really starting to wobble in 6th. So of the two of them, or maybe both of them, do you think, is there a call here to go really, really strong in these games and put your best foot forward in Europe and maybe use that as your direction into Europe next year? Or do you think they would be better off focusing on the league and maybe rotating a bit for these games?
I think if they have aspirations to improve, you need to go as strong as possible in both. I really do. I mean, like, you're talking about 10, 11 games left in the Premier League season, and only this cup competition otherwise. So I don't really think that either one of those sides have much excuse to not go full throttle in both, to be honest. Like, it's still improbable that they win it because, well, for starters, Liverpool are in it. Obviously, we've spoken about Leverkusen and maybe 1 or 2 other teams who are above their station, for example. But I don't think that that's necessarily a reason to just say at this stage, we're not going to bother, or we'll prioritise the Premier League. They've been very inconsistent in the Premier League. Brighton, I think, you talk about, some people have said Brighton have had a bad season. Loads of people have said West Ham have had a terrible season. Honestly, I just don't see it. West Ham are 7th, and they're at this stage of the European competition again. That, yes, they've had 2 terrible runs. That's absolutely true, but it doesn't make it a bad season. Like, their season is good. It's West Ham, they're 7th. That's good in itself. We've been speaking for, 2 years now about a top 7, basically, and West Ham don't figure in that.
Yeah.
So they are doing the best of the teams who have excused themselves from that top 7, basically. Maybe aside from Aston Villa, who aren't normally included in that either, but spend a good bit more money. So I don't think that there's any reason whatsoever for either of Brighton or West Ham to go under strength or below par. Like, yes, there might be 1 or 2 rotations along the way, but I don't think it should be at this stage. Like, Freiburg away, Burnley at home, Freiburg at home. Are you telling me that West Ham squad is not deep enough to do that in the space of 8 days?
Yeah.
It absolutely has to be.
It has to be. With the money spent and the time that Moyes has been there building that squad, it has to be. And it is funny, the narrative around West Ham having a bad season. So starting in 16-17, they finished 11th. 17-18, they finished 13th. 18-19, they finished 10th. 19-20, they finished 16th. 2021, they finished 6th. That's that weird season where COVID happened and there was just lots of odd things going on. But they had a really good season that year. But they had no European football as a distraction that season. They finished 6th. The following year, with Europe, they finished 7th. last year they finished 14th, and I know they won the Conference League, but they still finished 14th. And up until, April, they looked like they were in real danger of going down. They only finished 6 points ahead of Leicester, who finished 18th. This is their second best and maybe best season in over a decade. Like, go back even before that, 15-16, they finished 7th, no Europe that year. 14-15, they finished 12th. Like, it's one thing getting 6th when you just got the league. To get 7th and potentially get 6th, while also going deep in Europe, is a much more impressive season. So this idea that West Ham are having a bad season just doesn't really hold any water, especially when you start to dig into some of the issues that they've had in terms of injuries. I mean, Lucas Paqueta, I think we'd agree, is the best player at that club by, I would say, a bit of a distance from number 2, whether you view that as Bowen or Kudus or I would say it's a decent gap at the moment between Paqueta and Kudus. And they haven't had Paqueta in quite a while now. And I know he's back, but like, we've seen what it's like going through spells without your best players. It's really tough, especially when you're West Ham. And like, it's one thing for us when we lose Salah, we lose Trent, we lose Dominic, we lose Alisson. Okay, we've still got Virgil, we've still got Alexis, we've still got Ibu, we've still got Darwin. I know Darwin missed a couple of games, but do you know what I mean? We have plenty of high-end, high-caliber players to make up for it. They lose Paqueta. The only 2 players at that club that I think anyone above them would be looking at and thinking, maybe interested there, is Mohamed Kudus, obviously, and Jared Bowen. Outside of Paqueta, that's kind of it. So when you've got 3 high-level talents and you lose one of them, it's very, very hard to overcome that, especially when you've got some extremely mediocre players in that team as well. So I think they've done a really good job this year. And if you think I'm not running the narrative that West Ham have improved after selling Declan Rice and Arsenal have gotten worse after buying Declan Rice, I fear you underestimate my pettiness. No, I think you're right. I think they should both be going as strong as possible. They're both out of the domestic cups. They both have opportunities here to do real damage in Europe and really make an impression. And the likelihood of either of them slipping out of the top half of the Premier League is quite low, in my opinion. Unless Chelsea were to put together a run, which they're maybe capable of with the talent they have. I just don't see it. Like, Fulham aren't going to do it, and everybody below them is too far below. So unless Chelsea jump their way above Brighton, I just don't see it happening. Moving on to the Conference League, Karl, or the Vanarama, as Guy likes to call it. We have Sturm Graz versus Lille, Olympiacos versus Maccabi Tel Aviv, Molde versus Club Bruges, Union Saint-Gilloise versus Fenerbahce, Servette versus Victoria Plzen, Dinamo Zagreb versus PAOK, and Maccabi Haifa versus Fiorentina. I've left one out there purposely, but of those 7 games, is there one that you're thinking, I might want to see a bit of that one?
Are you being facetious?
No, well, I'm just wondering, would you be tempted to watch a bit of Fiorentina because they've got a couple of players that maybe have caught your eye? Would you be tempted to throw on Fenerbahce because there's a couple of decent players there? Or is this just, an afterthought for you? Like, you're not, maybe when we get to the semi-final, final, you'll pay more attention? Because my point is, for now, this competition doesn't have any real prestige. It's only been won twice by Roma and West Ham. And it's a little bit of you won the Conference League. Oh, well, here's your pat on the head, your Blue Peter badge, and your attaboy, but, come back to us when you do something real. But in 20 years, the hope obviously is that this tournament holds a bit more prestige. Now, they're going to have to tweak the rules around how you qualify for it. I think maybe putting the domestic cup winners into it would make it better. than just the current scheme of it. But is there any of those games that you would, if the Europa League games weren't on, so you didn't have the Europa League games, is there any of those 7 games that you might think that's worth spending a couple of hours on my Thursday evening watching?
I genuinely wouldn't. And
Fair.
Now I genuinely wouldn't. 5, 6, 7 years ago, would I? Maybe I would have put on Fenerbahce Union if I hadn't already seen Union in Liverpool's group. But even that would be a bit of a stretch.
So no interest in Servette versus Victoria Plizen then?
None.
No, that's fair. Right, the big one then. Ajax versus Aston Villa. It's unfortunate that this is the draw because I think this is what people would have liked to have seen be the final. When Ajax were dropping into this competition and we knew Villa had progressed from the group, I think a lot of people were looking at that and going, well, that would be a great final in terms of prestige, in terms of name recognition.
Yeah, European history.
Yeah, European Cup winning Aston Villa and 4-time European Cup winning Ajax. Like, that's one that at least draws your eye and your focus. But instead, they meet now. Villa obviously sit 4th in the Premier League. They're having an exceptional season under Unai Emery. Now, whether they can sustain 4th or not remains to be seen. Ajax are 5th in the Eredivisie, and they are having a honker of a season. Now, it has improved drastically from when they were in the bottom 3, but this is still completely unacceptable. They're 27 points off top with 10 games still to go. They are 17 points off second and 11 points off third. They've won one of their last 5 games. That was against Utrecht at the weekend. They have been generally garbage since late January. They beat Heracles then they drew with PSV, which to be fair is not bad. They lost to Heerenveen. They drew with NEC. They lost to Alkmaar. They were not impressive at all in either game against Bodo Glimt, and the red cards really, really helped them because they were 2-0 down at home in the first leg. Bodo had a player sent off and Ajax got 2 goals. And then in the second leg, the Bodo had a player sent off in the 65th minute, managed to equalise after that goal, and Ajax needed and to be fair, Ajax had a player sent off beforehand, so it didn't make a huge difference. But, the first leg, definitely the red card and the penalty is what changed it. But they weren't impressive in either game. Haven't watched the Utrecht game at the weekend because, Jesus, why would you? But for Villa, even though they're not very good, beating Ajax is still a notable scalp in the same way that last year we were awful. But for teams to beat us, it was still a notable scalp for them. It was still something that those players could talk about afterwards and remember afterwards. So what do you make of this fixture? Is this one where you think Villa should go full strength and just go and look to advance? Because should they knock out Ajax, it's kind of hard to see them not winning the competition unless Lille do a madness.
Yeah, there's maybe one or two like Fenerbahce. We saw that they are able to be good at times, or Fiorentina can be good at times. But yeah, Villa are certainly the team putting together the more impressive domestic campaign at the minute. Look, with it being over 2 legs, with it being Emery, with it being Villa's home form as it is, I think even a draw is a really good result for them in this first leg, to be honest. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what we get, in fact. If this wasn't at 5:45, same time as Liverpool, I'd probably be watching this over the other Europa League games. So a bit of a shame from this side of the water, I suppose, that it is at the same o'clock, but it should be the match that you look at as providing, should we say, a semi-finalist as a bare minimum. It'd be very, very harsh if whoever wins this tie then gets, let's say, Lille as you pointed out, in the next round. That would be the hardest route to the final for sure. But then you're also clearing rivals out of the way. Well,
See, that's the thing. Maybe that's what you want. Maybe you want Lille next and then Fenerbahce or Fiorentina. And then you want to get to the final and you look across and you've got Molde or you've got Maccabi Tel Aviv or Victoria Plzen or whoever. Maybe that's what you do want, is that you want the harder draw so that when it comes to the one-off final and you don't have that second leg to rescue yourselves, maybe you do want the harder draws across two legs.
I don't need a VPN. I've got nothing to hide. This is what I used to tell myself before I hooked up with LibertyShield.com. Not only is my home internet now fully encrypted, but I can now access all the websites I want, whenever I want, and do so from absolutely anywhere. As a Liverpool fan, I love to know I can now watch every match, regardless of whether it's on UK TV or not. My Liberty Shield VPN makes sure nothing is blocked and guarantees me super fast streaming speed throughout that match. You can get connected right now with their software package, which includes a 48-hour no-obligation free trial and instant access to their apps for Apple, Android, Fire TV, PC, Mac, and Android TV. Or go a step further like I have and get one of their pre-configured VPN routers. These small but powerful devices allow you to easily connect every device in your home to VPN, making it the perfect solution for smart TVs, Mac boxes, and games consoles. Visit LibertyShield.com today and use coupon code AIVPN25 to get 25% off at checkout.
Yeah, possibly so. And I mean, like for Villa, in terms of the Premier League, I think that like you go as strong as you can in this because it's Ajax and because, again, you should be able to handle 3 games. That's, kind of the point of being a decent side. But also, maybe they hold one of their attackers, let's say like only one of Bailey or Diaby stats, for example. And then the rest is, kind of how it's been anyway, simply because they have Spurs at the weekend. And if they do beat Spurs, then that's suddenly an 8-point gap between them. And that's, with 10 games to go, even though Spurs would have a game in hand, that's suddenly quite a big gap for you to seal top 4. So maybe you could understand first leg a little bit more, not safety first, but certainly reserved, let's say, on this one occasion, just because of the context of who they play and the fact they've got a second leg at home and so on. But generally speaking, I don't think that this stage of the competition, the fact that there's not really going to be an enormous backlog of fixtures, I don't really think that there's anything too drastic for them to worry about in terms of overload. You look at FA Cup, they went out to Chelsea on home soil. They had a little bit of a wobble around that period of time. It was like 1 win in 6-7, something like that. They seem to have got themselves back on track now. So again, you're looking at a dozen games unless you win in Europe. So you might as well go all out. The players who are fit and the players who are in form, 10 games or 12 games or 16 games is not going to make an enormous difference to them in terms of fatigue now towards the end of the season and so on. Like their workload in the final 6-7 matches in the Premier League is 1 a week. You'll be fine.
Yeah, you will. And like there is an international break coming up. So you've got to get through Ajax, then like you said, Spurs. By the way, as an aside, hell of a Super Sunday. Villa Tottenham at 1:00 and then us against City at 3:30. That's a cracking Sunday of football. There's also West Ham, Burnley, Brighton, Forest, if you're deranged and want to watch those games instead. Then they go Ajax again. Then it's West Ham away, which will be tough, but it's winnable. And then you're into that international break. So, it's a lot of games in a short period of time, but then you do get that little break afterwards. And not all your players are going away on international duty, and those that do go won't all play. So, yeah, I mean, Villa should go full strength. And if they do go full strength and they play well, I think they'll beat Ajax because Ajax just aren't good. But it should certainly be an interesting game. And I have to say, Karl, like, when you look at the Champions League, I think you'd have to make City the favourites. Real, obviously a team to fear. Inter, I don't see this year as big a threat as last year, but you never know. Atleti, kind of the same. Don't see them as a big threat, but if they beat Inter, they get through confidently. Arsenal, if they can get by Porto, which you'd expect them to do, be a bit embarrassing if they don't. They'll be hard to beat across two legs because, they're playing very well. They've peaked in the February-March region like they did last year. So you don't really want to get them in the next round either, but maybe come semi-finals, the occasion catches up with them and they start to, run out of steam, which is what they've done the last 2 years. But they'll be one of the contenders for this. And PSG and Bayern, because of their names, are worth mentioning. But really and truly, if you're looking at potential winners, I would say City, Real, and after that, I wouldn't back any of them. But in the Europa League, of the 4 teams I could see winning it, 3 of them are English. Ourselves, Brighton, and West Ham. Now, Brighton and West Ham would be draw dependent. I think we can beat anybody, and I think Leverkusen could potentially beat anybody. I don't see Sporting having quite enough to win it. I don't see Atalanta having quite enough to win it. Though, I mean, to be fair, they're not any worse than Brighton or West Ham. And then in the Conference League, Villa, I think, should be prohibitive favourites to win it. So we could get an English clean sweep this year. Do you think is that a mild possibility, a strong possibility?
Yeah, I'd say a medium possibility. Villa are the only team in the Conference League. That's obviously where you would say is the biggest risk, perhaps, because one bad day and you could have too much to do, and then there's nobody else to take your place. I think 2 of the top 3 favourites for the Europa League are definitely going to be at least one of them finalists, if not 2. Obviously, again, draw dependent. I don't really see Brighton as candidates to win. We see too many flaws in them to really go the distance, especially in 2 legs, let alone a final against a team which, in theory, will be pretty good. Man City are probably as big favourites for the Champions League as we are ourselves for the Europa League, I'd imagine. And it will be really difficult for any team to stop either of those 2. So I would say 2 out of 3 would be my prediction. But I could quite conceivably see only one, and it's Aston Villa as well, because it's just, that's European football, it's knockout football, final on its day. Like, I don't see PSG winning the Champions League, but I could see them beating Man City over 2 legs.
Yeah, exactly. Because I said this on Two Footed today, whoever's, regardless of anything else, whoever PSG play, they're going to have the best player. Because Kylian Mbappe is the best player left in that. I think he's the best player in the world, but he's certainly the best player left in that competition. And when you've got the best player, that can often overcome. All they need to do, if they can go into games against City and be really resolute defensively, and we've seen City this year look a little bit clunky and have to rely on moments of individual brilliance. Like at the weekend, for example, they looked really clunky and they were having a really tough time breaking down a mediocre Manchester United team with mediocre players all over the pitch. And it needed that moment of incredible brilliance from Phil Foden to win, to get them back into that game. And if that's up against PSG, and let's say Mbappe scores that early goal like Rashford did, and then they're sitting in and looking to counter, you'd be much more scared of Kylian Mbappe and Bradley Barcola on a counter than you would of Alejandro Garnacho and Marcus Rashford. So, yeah, I'm like you. I could see them knocking out Manchester City. I don't see them winning the competition because I think they're the type they'd knock out City and then lose to Bayern in the next round, or lose to somebody that they've just kind of overlooked and taken for granted, maybe like an Arsenal who don't have that European pedigree, and they're looking at and thinking, well, hang on, we're quarters and semis and final every year here. These haven't done anything in the Champions League for years. None of these players have any real European pedigree, so we're going to win this easily. And then Arsenal just, blow them away in 15 minutes. or we've seen PSG do some spectacularly dumb things in the competition over the years. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Like there's a world in which you see 3 English teams winning them. It's more likely that it's 2 than 3. But there is just that possibility that the only one that does it is Villa. Perhaps because City run into a PSG who just find a way to beat them. And perhaps because maybe we run out of steam a little bit because of the effort involved in going for 4 trophies and the injuries that we've had. Or maybe it gets to the crunch and Jurgen just makes the decision, you know what? I want to leave with the league. The Europa League would be nice, but if I can win the league, I'm going to win the league. And he throws his focus that way. It would be tremendous crack if we were the only one to win a European trophy and won all the domestic trophies. Obviously, that's the preferred outcome. But yeah, I mean, we're at this stage of these competitions, and the favourites to win them all is the Premier League. It's City, it's us, it's Villa. And I think that does speak volumes of where the Premier League is right now in comparison to the other leagues, because it's not all that long ago. We were looking at, it was only the 2 at the time, the Champions League and Europa League, and thinking, oh, well, Spanish clubs are going to win both. And before that, it was all Italian clubs are going to win both. And then when there was 3, it was Italian clubs are going to win all 3. Now it is the Premier League. And after decades of propaganda about the best league in the world, it is undeniably now the best league in the world, I think.
Yes, richest league in the world. That often translates to best.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think Liverpool will win the Europa League. I said this back in the group stage. I didn't really think we had to take the group stage with as many seniors as we did, but fine. But the way that the fixtures have panned out and the context of where the ties are and when and so on, you could feasibly see us make enough changes this week to get it badly wrong, because we've got Man City at the weekend and we want to, rest and make sure we've got a really strong side for that. And maybe Klopp thinks, 2 legs. Yeah, the Premier League's the priority, but we've got an additional game to turn this around at Anfield if we need to. So, it could be, and we'll talk about this now, I guess Kumas and Dans and all the rest of them go to Prague and most of them play. And we lose by too many goals to get it back. Or they defend really well in the second leg and suddenly we're out. And that kind of is the decision that he would make in that case, that the Premier League and that fixture exactly is the priority. It's just a lot earlier than it to be.
So the league is obviously priority number 1, Karl. If you were told right now you have to prioritise either the second leg against Sparta, where you're 2-1 down, so you've got to either prioritise that or prioritise United in the Cup. Basically, you've got to prioritise the Europa League or the FA Cup. Which are you going for? Because the Europa League's the only one Jurgen hasn't won yet.
Yeah.
And it would properly mean that he'd won the lot. But the idea of a domestic treble is quite nice. Obviously, City did it the year we won the European Cup. And it would be quite funny if we did it this year and they won the European Cup, because when we won the European Cup, nobody cared about their domestic treble and Pep was very upset about it. If we did it this year, nobody would care about their European Cup and Pep would be really upset about it again.
Yes, I think I would have to prioritise Europe. Backwards and forwards on this, to be honest. Obviously, in the space of 15 seconds since you asked me, I always really, really like the domestic cups, and I like to go as far as possible in them. And I like the idea of getting to both finals twice, 3 seasons. But with it being away to United, with it being still, very, very difficult fixtures ahead potentially in the semis and the final, even if we do go through, there's more chance and probability, I think, of European success than the FA Cup success. And maybe the final deciding thing is, I really, really don't want Jurgen Klopp's last game in charge of Liverpool to be an FA Cup final where we lose to Man City.
Yeah. I mean,
if you're only giving me one or the other, I'll go Europe based on those two factors, really.
Yeah, I mean, like, if the script follows, we will beat United, get City in the semi-final, and then Chelsea in the final. And, I think I could stomach a loss to City more than to Chelsea because Chelsea are garbage. But I think if we're fit and whole, I think we wipe the floor with Chelsea. Whereas with City, they're a really good team. Now, they obviously could well be playing a Champions League final. So, what date is the Champions League final this year? Actually, is it before or after the FA Cup?
It's on the 1st of June. 1st of June.
So it's after the FA Cup.
The week after.
Yeah, and they would then have like a week to prepare for that final.
Whereas we would be midweek Europa League, FA Cup at the weekend, only 3 days between them.
Which is a bit shit. The Europa League final should have been the following Wednesday, not the Wednesday before. Yeah, see, that would definitely play more into City's hands because they'd have a week between the last game of the Premier League to prepare for it. And you'd want to go strong because you don't want to give players 2 weeks off and then run them into a Champions League final. So they'd be going as full strength as possible, where we might be coming off a Europa League win and have some injuries, have some tired legs. Yeah. I'm with you. I would prioritize the Europa League as well because Europe is Europe. And the UEFA Cup has always been a competition that's mattered to us. Like, it was the first and only European trophy for Bill Shankly. It was the first European trophy for Bob Paisley. It was the European trophy under Houllier that kind of relaunched us as a European force after the ban after Heysel, and then the horrendous European nights that we experienced under Souness, and then some stinky ones under Roy Evans as well. Some great ones. The Auxerre 3-0 win, having been 2-0 down, was tremendous. But the UEFA Cup has always been really important to us. And, we lost that final back in 2016 to Sevilla when we should have beaten them. And it would have been a great start to Jurgen's era as manager. And it would be nice for him to close out winning that trophy, because that year he lost the League Cup final. We've won the League Cup this year. He lost the Europa League final. If he could close out his tenure, obviously with a Premier League, and then with that, I mean, that would perfectly bookend things for him.
A nice 3 trophies. We're not getting too greedy then anymore. We'll give up the quadruple, hey?
Yeah. I mean, that's fine. Look, it's we're not a selfish club. We're not greedy. We don't want it to be all about us. We're just here overcoming the odds time and time again. Jurgen Klopp's plucky Reds, this unsustainable form, totally reliant on Alisson and Mohamed Salah, Karl.
Yeah.
We can't win without them. Totally reliant on them. And we'll just take the 3 cups and we'll be on our way. You mentioned the possibility of going into tomorrow night's game with a bunch of kids. So let's talk about what the team might look like. Caoimhín Kelleher, there was a rumour that he was injured. That rumour has turned out to be false. He is training today. But do you risk him with City ahead, or do you go with Adrian?
Oh, God, no, Kelleher.
Okay, that's fine. In defence, I'm thinking Joe Gomez will start. I'm just not sure where. I
would take this game as the one that you said the other day and play him centre-back with Kwanzaa.
Gomez and Kwanzaa centre-back.
That's what I would
Costas left-back.
Yes.
And Bradley right-back?
Yeah, I think Bradley's not been, shall we say, excellent on his last couple of starts. So, probably looking at another 60 minutes or so for him here. You want him fully up for the weekend, so don't want to be, damaging confidence or anything of the sort. So, yeah, I think we definitely start him, but not for the full match.
And that's a strong back four. Like, Bradley, Gomez, Quansah, and Costas is a strong back four. Midfield and attack are where it gets a little bit interesting. So Szoboszlai came back against Forest, didn't quite look like himself, but he's back. He got minutes under his belt. Do you start him here for 60 and then get him off and get him ready for City? Or do you bring him off the bench here to get him ready for City?
I mean, I'd be tempted to start him, but then it would be more like 45 or 60.
So him, would you go McConnell and Clark in the other two roles? Because I'd be wrapping Endo in cotton wool. The question is, do you play Alexis, who's he's played a lot of football this year and he's already had 2 knocks and I don't want to risk a third one.
I wouldn't even let Alexis watch this game on time.
Just in case he gets too excited. So McConnell and Clark and
I guess
Trainiani off the bench.
I'd probably still be tempted to play Endo myself.
Would you?
Yeah, I think I'd go Endo, Szoboszlai, Clark.
Do you know, it wouldn't surprise me if you see Joe Gomez in midfield again.
Yeah.
And he starts Virgil and maybe does the thing with Virgil and Ibu where they play half each.
Yeah, maybe.
I think if he's going to play, yeah, it's more the lack of numbers. Like if we start Dominic, let's say it is Dominic, McConnell and Clark, you'll have Endo on the bench, Alexis on the bench, and Trainiani on the bench, I guess. And I don't really want to play Alexis, like you said. I actually don't want to play Endo at all because I feel like if we've got Endo and Alexis in midfield, I think we've got a great chance against City. If we're missing one of them, I feel like that chance gets infinitely smaller. But we'll see. In attack, then, I assume Harvey starts. I assume Gakpo starts. Yeah. But I wonder if Diaz might be just held back for the weekend and maybe Darwin starts.
I mean, I wouldn't be playing Diaz in this. Nunez, you could say maybe get some time. I don't know whether I would start him.
I would have been starting Jayden Danns, except he's not pictured in training today. Yeah. And someone said to me he's actually not on the B list that we submitted. So I don't know what the situation is, whether he's actually eligible to play or not. I'm not fully sure how those rules work.
Right, so he wasn't in training, that's for sure. That's a good question. I will very quickly ask someone while we're recording this. I mean, Kumas is obviously the one who has one start to his name. So is he in the driving seat, therefore?
1 start, 1 goal. Can't argue.
All right, so my Reds 21s and says he's concussed, so he could be playing, but it would depend on number of games.
Right.
Number of days.
Number of days, yeah. Yeah, because it was Saturday. Concussion, I think, is 5 days, I think. But it also depends on how he reacts to the different tests that they do. So it might just be safer to not play him at that age. After a concussion, I know what that's like. You play too quickly, you get another one, and all of a sudden you can have a while where you feel very, very spacey. So maybe best to just hold him back. Kumas, I mean, look, the guy started and scored against Southampton. Personally, I don't think Sparta Prague are better than Southampton. Do you know, I think the Championship is overall going to be a stronger level than the Czech League with respect to the Czech League. This is not a Sparta team that has real standout stars. You know, a couple of years ago, they had Adam Plozek and Adam Karabek, and Plozek has gone on to Leverkusen where he's a squad player, and Karabek seems to have become a squad player at Sparta, which is very concerning if that's how his development has gone. They've got some older, more experienced players. Like, they're a team of grown men. They'll be physical. They're obviously not a bad team. They've gotten to the knockout stage of this competition. But I'd still fancy us. Even with a weakened team, to go there and get a result, even if it's a draw. Yeah. I'd be more than happy to come home with a draw, knowing we've got Anfield awaiting them.
I mean, I would be absolutely fine with using this as a build-up game, and literally all of, let's say, Van Dijk, Szoboszlai and Endo come off at half-time, and you have 2 subs then for the second half. I would be absolutely fine with that.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, very, very fair. Right then, prediction on Liverpool versus Sparta Prague.
I'll stick with 1-1, just on the uncertainty of who'll play. If we do go with a really strong team to start with, and like Darwin starts and the likes of it, then maybe we get a 2-1. But by and large, as long as we don't lose by more than a goal, I don't really care. We should smash them at Anfield either way.
Yeah, I'm very much in the same boat. I'm going to go for a 2-1 win, because I think he might go strong to start and then bring lads off at half time and bring 2 more lads off on 60. It could be a thing where we go out and we hammer them for the first half and we get 3 goals up. But I'll go 2-1, and then all eyes on City, and we will do a scouted for City on Friday. Which will come out on Friday. I think the Raw following this game is myself, Trev, and Guy. That third...
Jim now.
It's Jim, so it's Jim. Okay, so myself, Trev, and Jim, the same group that were there for the unsustainable win over Nottingham Forest, will hopefully be back for another unsustainable win over Sparta Prague. And we thank you for listening. Have you anything to plug, Karl, before you go?
I do have a piece on Bradley Barcola on FOTMob. I will have a piece on Sporting Amorim and the gang on FOTMob as well, but I don't know what that will be on yet because the game hasn't been played until tonight. And we'll have a piece on the Indy on Luton, I think, ahead of the weekend. So that might be out Thursday. Could be Friday.
There you go. Follow Karl Matchett at Karl Matchett. Follow Guy Drinkle at Guy Drinkle. And we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.
Sports Social Podcast Network.